It's been 1 month since the Rohingya refugee crisis began, and there seems to be no resolution on the horizon. The number of Rohingya Muslims who fled to Bangladesh now exceeds 400,000. At least 240,000 are children. As many as 200 Rohingya villages have been abandoned, and Myanmar's army accused of ethnic cleansing. The tension in the region is older than Myanmar itself. The divisions run deep, explaining why Rakhine State is now rocked by violence and why so many fear for their lives. For tonight's special report, we are on both sides of the border. South Asia correspondent James Bennett is in the refugee camps of Bangladesh. But we begin with the origins of the story, and Southeast Asia correspondent Liam Cochrane, who is in Myanmar.
Myanmar's most iconic sites may be Buddhist, but it's a country of different religions and 135 recognised ethnic groups. The Muslim Rohingyas are not on that list. About 1 million Rohingyas live in the country's west, near the Bangladesh border, an area that's long been a frontier between Buddhism and Islam. Educator and interfaith activist A. Lewin says Muslims have lived in Rakhine State since at least the 15th century.
Some were serving in the court as ministers, even as prime ministers. There were generals in the Rakhine army. This clearly showed that these groups were intermingling.
I never deny the existence of Muslim community in the Mraut Kingdom before the Burmese conquest of the kingdom in 1785. But it was very small community.
The Muslim community grew significantly during the 19th century when colonial Britain brought in workers to grow rice in Myanmar.
These historical facts are interpreted in two very different ways, either as evidence that Rohingyas have lived in Myanmar for generations, or as proof that they're relative newcomers and therefore don't deserve citizenship.
The tensions have led to outbursts of violence for decades. Many Rohingyas live in camps or remote rural areas. Their travel is restricted and poverty is rife. Amid this Asian apartheid, an insurgency formed.
And it burst onto the scene on the 9th of October last year with coordinated attacks on 3 border police posts. And they took control of that post for several hours, they looted its armory, and then they made off.
The security forces retaliated against suspected insurgents and civilians, prompting thousands of Rohingyas to flee amid allegations of atrocities. Last month, the militants attacked again, this time hitting 30 police posts. Again, the response was brutal.
It prompted a disproportionate response from the security forces. Now that area, much of it is depopulated.
The United Nations has called Myanmar's response textbook ethnic cleansing. Within Myanmar, though, there's little sympathy, especially among the hardline monks who've stoked the rage.
Myanmar soldiers defended us against attacks from Bengali terrorists, but the world doesn't blame the terrorists. It seems like they support terrorism.
There are concerns the crackdown could further radicalise Rohingyas and attract even more dangerous players. Nobel Prize winner Aung San Suu Kyi is being urged to intervene, but she has no control over the military.
There is a human tragedy unfolding on the Bangladesh border. It's a tragedy, the scope and scale of which will come to define international views about Myanmar for years to come.
As the violence flares, thousands have fled, running for their lives across the border to Bangladesh. Our South Asia correspondent James Bennett is just across that border, where hundreds of thousands of Rohingya refugees continue to fight for their survival.
That's right, Liam. As the crowds have increased dramatically at the camps here in Bangladesh, conditions have deteriorated sharply, and the long-term prospects are grim. These people have been driven from Myanmar, and they're not wanted here in Bangladesh either.
None of this existed just 1 month ago. This is Kutupalong camp, a squalid safe haven of sorts. From Mohammed Shuife, a rare English speaker among the refugees, we hear graphic testimony of the horrors driving Rohingya to this hell.
And cut and shoot
The 29-year-old had worked for Doctors Without Borders in Mongdor, where numerous villages have been razed.
Your home was
Yeah.
He says soldiers shot at fleeing refugees, an allegation corroborated by Bodhi Alam.
Nice to meet you.
It took 7 days to reach Bangladesh through mountains and forest, and I saw military firing from all directions along the way.
Last month, he says, the army came to his village of Asimbor and told people, run.
At first, I was unable to bring my 2 disabled children. They were beaten and kicked severely, but lived.
He, wife Noor Shafa, and 4 able-bodied children carried the crippled boy and girl to safety, leaving everything else behind. The scale and speed of the exodus has exceeded all expectation. A staggering 40% of the estimated 1 million Rohingya who lived in Rakhine State just 1 month ago are now living like this. Safe from persecution, yes, but hunger and disease loom.
People are using this water not only to bathe, but also to wash food and even to drink. But unfortunately, it's also a latrine. And it's not hard to see why aid agencies say this immense concentration of people has all the makings of a public health catastrophe.
Poor and densely populated, Bangladesh's humanitarian welcome has limits.
The Rohingya, are they allowed to come out from here? No.
But for Bodhi Alam's family, survival means staying, whatever they must endure here.
They're burning our villages. Our neighbours were killed and slaughtered. There's no reason to go back.
And right now, nowhere else to go. James Bennett, ABC News, Kutupalong.